everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Have you found the keys to unlock your best trip? On a Trafalgar tour, you unlock more than just the world. We give you the keys to discover real connections and one-of-a-kind experiences. It all starts with expert itineraries where everything is taken care of. With Trafalgar, your money goes further, and so do you. Unlock your best self. Discover more at Trafalgar.com/unlock. That's TRAFALGAR.com/unlock.
How's it going, and welcome back to On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. And if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe, and as always, I am joined by the 2020 TGFBI champion, Kevin Hastings. Kevin, I gotta ask, did you end up with Alek Manoah in the sweepstakes last week anywhere?
No, I did not, but it appears there may be a possibility I'll end up with him soon, like with Logan Gilbert, if he struggles a little bit.
Yeah, I stashed Logan Gilbert like 2 weeks prior to his call-up. I felt pretty proud of myself for it. I got him for $2, and I stashed him for the first start, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep stashing him. All right, I'm still stashing him. He has yet to make it into my rotation, but I haven't dropped him yet. I haven't been forced to drop him yet, but I've seen it happen, and I'm with you. I can see it. I don't know. I think Manoah is going to be a little tougher to drop based on the bids that went out to bring him onto their rosters this past week. We saw upwards of like over $500 going in some main events in TGFBI. It's going to be tough to part ways with somebody that you paid that much up to get.
Absolutely. One of my NFBC leagues, he went for 402 of a remaining 486. So that fantasy manager down to $84. And I thought that was I had seen other bids that high in that range. So I knew that was a possibility, but from somebody with that amount left was really surprising to me.
Yeah, I got to know, what was the backup bid there?
It was over 400.
Okay.
So he needed to go to get him. He had to do that.
It would have been insult to injury, of course, if the backup bid was like
Exactly.
$200 or something. All right, we're going to talk about bids like that, possibly, and more. We have a very special guest joining us, one that every fantasy baseball podcaster already knows, and one that every fantasy podcast listener should already know. His name is Chris, whereas he's better known in the industry as @BaseballPods on the Twitter. Chris does an amazing job of spreading the good word about great verbal content by reviewing and putting together synopsis of episodes of various baseball-related podcasts, as well as organizing the ever-popular and ever-growing fantasy baseball podcast Bracketology every February, which we were very gracious to be part of at the very last possible second last, as we were in episode 3. Going up against Sleeper in the Bus, who was on episode, I think, 903 at the time or something like that.
It was something like that.
So that was fun. Of course, Chris also puts out his own great content through his website, baseball-pods.com. So check that out. There'll be a link in the episode description. So make sure to check that out when you can, if you haven't already. Chris, thanks so much for joining us to talk some FAAB. How's your FAAB been treating you this season?
First of all, thanks for having me. Always great to be on the Pitcher List Network. You guys are like the mafia of fantasy baseball now. I think Nick Pollock is Don Corleone and Alex Fast is, I don't know if he's a wartime or a peacetime consigliere, but whatever he does, whatever he is, he's right there. So it's great to be with you guys. FAAB's been okay. I'm not Vlad Sedler. I'm more of a FAAB misperer than a whisperer, but I did get Alek Manoah for $252 in TGFBI. And I felt good for that. 180 something was the backup bid. I'm like a middle of the pack, like 8th or 9th, and everyone have suffered through some injuries. I've been stashing Jaron Duran for the entire time and thought I was super smart and forgot about the Olympics. That's going to be something. So some people say he'll be back in August. If that's going to be the case, that's going to be a mistake for me. If he comes back in the next week or two, I think he can make a big impact in the second half. But I'm not like I said, I'm not the greatest FAAB person yet. I'm learning that skill. And that's why I don't play the main event yet this year. My goal is to do that in person next year. I feel like if I'm going to put down that amount of cash, I want to get the experience and meet all the wonderful people in this community that we follow. Looking forward to that's my goal. My goal is next year to be in Vegas for a main, and then I can really mess up my FAAB.
There you go. Yeah, if you're going to mess it up in person, right? Yeah, at least
That's
be able
right.
to put faces to names as you're doing it. So I feel you on that one. Chris, thanks again so much for joining us. We look forward to breaking things down and getting your insight on this. You've been doing this. I think that I heard you talking to Justin Mason on, I think, a TGFBI podcast a couple months ago at this point. It's just a reminder, like, you've been doing this for a long time. Just because you've only been doing this at Baseball Pods bracket for the last 2 seasons, I think a lot of people don't realize how long you've been at it. Can you elaborate on that for our listeners who maybe didn't hear that little snippet with Justin Mason a couple months ago?
Sure. I'm in my mid 40s and I've been playing fantasy baseball since I was a freshman in high school, or maybe even an 8th grader. I remember when the rotisserie baseball book came out, I felt it was like someone was speaking to me in a language that I didn't know I needed to be spoken to in. It was just this beautiful combination of baseball and humor and wit and gambling and all these things that I love. And eventually I started writing in the mid to late 90s for Laura Michaels at Creative Sports, and rest in peace, one of the godfathers of the industry and the Zen master of fantasy baseball. And we did a lot. We're recording this on Zencaster, a platform, which Laura would certainly approve of. I worked for him for a number of years. I wrote for Rotoman and others for the National Fantasy Baseball and some fantasy football magazines. And then fantasy sports doesn't pay all my bills. In fact, it paid almost none of my bills. So sometimes careers get in the way, and I still love the game. I've been very close to the game. I play just about every aspect of the game. My life opened up, got a little more time in it a couple of years ago, and was able to, and I've always been listening to the podcast, and I was just like, but I really got into it in 2000, I think it was in 2019. And 2019, 2020, that off season. And I just couldn't believe the amount of amazing independent content that was out there that was not affiliated with CBS, Yahoo, ESPN, all those. And those guys are amazing too. But I was just like, wow, there is so much good stuff out here. Let me start promoting these podcasts. And one thing led to another, and it's taken off. And then the COVID hit, and I was like, let's have some fun as a community. I love this community. Let's do something together. Let's have a podcast brackets, and that was really fun. Pitcher List, of course, won year 1, and then they tied in year 2 with Rates and Barrels. Unfortunately, there's always going to be some people out there that are going to try to take advantage and spoil the fun for everybody, because I guess that's where they get their joy from. But we were able to really work well with both Nick and Alex, and then Derek Van Riper and Saris, to have a mega pod where they celebrated the unified victory this year. I love the podcast world, love the fantasy baseball podcast world. I just think people really support each other in our industry in general, with very few exceptions. And if our society looked a little bit more like that in terms of support, I think we'd be in a much better place. So anything I can do to promote the work that you guys do and other people do on the Pitcher List Network and fantasy baseball podcasts at large, I'm happy to do it. Any little role I can play.
Yeah, I think that collaboration episode that those guys did after the bracket was over. It was the final piece of the puzzle. It was just like, it was a nice final result in what could have ended up being something a little bit more on the negative side. And I'm glad that they were able to, that's what came out of it. And that was the most positive thing. That was great.
And if you want to know, like, behind the scenes, if anyone is really that nerdy enough to care about that, I will give you like a 15-second overview, which is basically, I was like, somebody was hacking the Twitter polls, because apparently you can do that.
Yeah.
Because it's free. And I was like, okay, what do we do? So I was like DMing DVR, DMing Eno, DMing Nick, DMing Alex, and Nick and Alex were like, this is terrible. We can't have this happen. You should give them this. And he was like, I don't want anything given to me. No, we need to do this. And I was also like talking to Justin Mason, because he does TGFBI. And like, when you put together these big events, it does take a lot of work. And I was like, Justin, what should I do? He's like, I'm not sure. What about this? What about that? I was like, oh no, I have this wonderful idea. So I like DM both of them. I was like, let's get on one thread together. I was like, how about a mega episode celebrating both of your pods and the unity of fantasy baseball podcast? And they were like, yes, boom. And those guys are my heroes for that, all four.
Yeah. And they killed it. It was amazing.
They killed it. It was amazing. It was like amazing content. And it was like, so someone tried to do something negative and instead something beautiful came out of it that wouldn't have existed if they weren't so negative. So whoever that small-minded person is out there, thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I do hope that if we make it into the bracket next year, that we're able to collaborate with whoever we end up going up against each week or at least each round, as far as we maybe make it. And that'd make for good content too, just doing collaboration or dual threat episodes.
I mean, and that's the spirit, man. Like in the first year we did it, first time I did it, I didn't think anyone was going to care. And next thing we had 70,000 votes, and most of them were probably legitimate the way it looks. But like one of my favorite stories, just to call out someone who I have just a ton of respect for in the industry. The number one overall seed was RotoWire and Jeff Erickson. And he was going up against a podcast that two college friends did called You Down with OBP. And that was the first round matchup, 1 versus 16. And Jeff called him up and was like, hey man, come on my show.
I remember that.
And he put the shine on these two dudes who are just college buddies, but they took pride in their show. Their show is very quality. There's a lot of, it's very analytics driven. And it was just like, that's what this is about. That's what we should be doing. And so Jeff will always have my respect for not only that, he's such an amazing human, but that's just an example of what we're trying to do is we build up the industry. And it's just like Nick and Alex, you bring together, so you have so many events where you bring people in, you raise money for charity. Justin Mason does that. It's just, that's what we should be doing. This is a fun game. And God bless us for that we have the privilege to play it, and anything we can do to spread some love or help others. That's what it's all about for me.
100%.
Again, well said, Chris. All right. On that note,
Kevin dropped some baseball knowledge.
No, that's perfect. Well said, as Adam said.
All right, let's move on to the game that we love to play. We're going to talk about some baseball. We got some news and notes to go over that happened throughout the course of the last week. Again, like I say every week, we try to keep our news and notes FAAB related, or at least things that might affect your FAAB decisions each Sunday. So if we miss anything you thought was really important, this isn't where we're going to talk about it. Sorry. So we got a lot to talk about those. So let's get, Chris, we're going to start with you. I feel like me and Kevin talk about the Dodgers lineup at least once an episode somehow, because I typically direct these things toward Kevin. So I'm going to send this one to your way first. Jimmy Nelson and AJ Pollock returned to the Dodgers, but Max Muncy left Friday's game with a right ankle pain. He missed today's game as Saturday as we're recording. If he misses any more time, what sort of playing time adjustments can you see for the Dodgers lineup moving forward?
I mean, with the Dodgers, the thing is they have so much depth. It's hard to tell. I think Matt Beattie is a good bat. I picked him up at a number of places, and I think he'll get some more time one way or the other, because it's not, Max Muncy was playing first base, I have to find a first baseman to play. It's like the Dodgers have so many interchangeable pieces. Muncy can play first, second, or third himself. You got Cody Bellinger that can play first as well if he needs to. Chris Taylor can play 3 or 4 positions. And then, but Beattie plays, first base and outfield, and I think he's probably the primary beneficiary. Pujols might get some more time. Maybe they see what Yoshi Tsutsugo can do over there, and then maybe if they switch people around, you could see Zach McKinstry getting a little more time as well. The thing is, I have a lot of Beattie and I have a lot of McKinstry in my daily leagues, especially because I just love having them to plug and play because they're professional hitters and they're going to produce in those leagues. And then, but I hopefully Muncy just he's doing so well. He's a beast. I confess it wasn't until he got hurt I realized how much he was carrying a couple of my teams. I hope it's not too long for him. AJ Pollock I have in a couple places as well. I don't think he gets hurt a lot. He's turning 34, and I don't think if any of these guys gets hot, I could see AJ Pollock being the odd man out and just playing like 3 times a week or something like that. That's the way I look at the Dodgers situation right now.
Yeah, I think it might be a little telling just the fact that Pollock wasn't in the lineup today on his first day back. McKinstry in left field instead, and Beattie, as you mentioned, starting at first base today on Saturday. All right, Kevin, we'll stick with the Dodgers at least, but we'll hit some pitchers. Tony Gonsolin is thought to start next week against the Pirates. for the Dodgers. In leagues where he hasn't already been stashed, is he a must add and must start right out of the gate?
If he's available, he's a must add. I don't know necessarily about must start in week 1. However, I'm leaning that way because he probably lines up for 2 starts. He should get Texas, Pittsburgh and Texas. That's a dream week. Even he went 38 pitches, 55 pitches, and 60 pitches in his 3 rehab starts. So we're probably looking at 70 to 75 pitches out of the gate against Pittsburgh. That might get him 5 innings. And then he should be at 80 to 90 pitches versus Texas. Against Texas, that could get him 5 or 6 innings. So I am not a must start, but you'd have to have a pretty deep pitching staff not to. And definitely a must add, yes.
Yeah, 100% rostered across TG FBI, so probably not out there on the wire in your 15 teamers, but something a little bit lower like a 12 teamer, he still might be out there. So again, like we say, we knock this into the ground every single week. Watch your drops. Somebody might have stashed him a little too early, couldn't hold on to him, dropped him before he came back. So he might be out there. Look on your wire.
I was just gonna add, like, I picked him up I love Gonsolin. I've been a massive fan of him. I had him like literally, I think 100% of my best balls last year and a number of other places. And then this year became a little more popular, so I couldn't get him as freely, but I did pick him up a couple of weeks ago in TGFBI to stash for this exact reason. And like Kevin said, I mean, Pittsburgh and Texas, if you could pick 2 teams to start against, maybe the Tigers, but those are the other 2. It's like,
those are my 3.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Rockies on the road.
That's right. Rockies on the road. But that's where I'm a big fan of him, and I will be starting him everywhere I have him, because I guess if you play in a 10-team league, I can imagine maybe you want to wait a week, but throw him out there. Whenever he's pitched well.
All right, Chris, speaking of pitchers,
you're stabbing me in the heart with this one.
Oh.
This is brutal.
The Marlins starter Eliza Hernandez came back from his lengthy IL stint this week, just to be sent right back with a quad strain he got while running the bases. On top of that, Cody Poteet, he's probably saying his name right, also joined him on the IL for Miami. Setting aside your opinions of pitchers hitting, are you
I can't set those aside. That's impossible.
You feel free to go into that tangent then. But are you stashing Hernandez for a second time in leagues that you still have him, or is this trip to the IL enough to cut bait at this point in the season?
Oh man, injuries this year have been brutal. Eliezer is one of my favorite pitchers. I love watching him pitch. I've been on him. I have him everywhere. He's just one of my guys. And to see that he comes back and pitches well, and then hurts his whatever pulls up lame running home. It's just like, why are these pitchers hitting? I ran that led me to run a poll on Twitter that got about 700 votes. Should we have, basically the poll was, should we have an NLDH or not? And 90% people said no, at least. So I think there are still some people. It's just I want to mail that to like Rob Manfred special delivery or something to like say, can we stop this idiocy? Apart from that, as you mentioned, Poteet got dinged. As much as I love Eliezer, he's on the 60-day DL. There's no way you can stash him. If you have unlimited injury slots, sure, go ahead. Do what you need to do. But he's an immediate cut for me in so many of my leagues, which breaks my heart. Luckily, I have him in a few dynasty spots where I'll be keeping him, obviously, and holding him because I think he's immensely talented. And the question for me is, so if you look at the Marlins depth chart, they've got 3 guys. And my question is, and Sixto's hurt, so he's still dinged. So it's just going to be interesting to see where they go next in terms of the call-up. I mean, I don't know, Kevin, if you have any ideas, but it's funny. I don't think they're going to accelerate the timeline. I think Jeter and Kim Ng are too smart for that. But they've got Edward Cabrera down there. They've got Braxton Garrett down there. Daniel Castano is the guy that I think will get the next call just because he's not like a massive prospect. They don't care about his clock as much, and he's 27. The one thing that one of the guys I've been tracking that I think it's too soon for him, but I don't know. I think Cabrera it's probably Max Meyer is another guy that's down there. I think it's too soon for him. But so I don't know. I don't know who's going to come up next, but I'll be honest with you, whoever they pick, I'll probably throw a little bit of FAAB on them, even if it's someone I really don't feel strongly about, because the Marlins, it's a good place to pitch. And I feel like they know how to get the most out of their pitchers and set them up for success.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate that Cabrera had the injury. He did pitch 2 innings in an extended spring training game a couple of days ago, and I haven't heard anything negative since then, although I didn't hear anything at all since. I think it was 3 days ago. Hopefully he's coming along, but like you said, they're not going to rush him. But I've been excited to see him all season long. Hopefully the recovery continues.
Well, Zach Thompson was the call up to replace Poteet, I believe, on the roster, but of course he's going to be in the bullpen. It looks like the Marlins don't need a starter until Tuesday, so they've got the weekend to at least think it over and see what options that they might have. So probably not a move you'll be able to make this Sunday on FAAB, but next Sunday there's 2 open spots in that rotation that you might see some additions next Sunday. All right, Kevin, your boy Kolton Wong is back on the IL with a left oblique problem. What adjustments have the Brewers made, and is there a way to capitalize on any extra playing time from any particular player for this coming week?
Maybe. Luis Urias is leading off now, or at least has the past couple of days, and that could lead to some more stolen base opportunities. He doesn't steal a lot, but he's probably good for a handful the rest of the season. He hasn't been great this season thus far, but coming on lately, a couple home runs just in the past 3 days, a stolen base earlier this week. And he's not somebody that necessarily has to be rostered, I don't think, but in 15-team leagues, he's definitely going to be, especially with this move to the leadoff spot. So that's who I'm keeping my eye on. Maybe even going ahead and looking to roster tomorrow evening if I have an extra spot that I don't have something else of real importance that I need to do. But definitely something I'm taking a look at there. He was getting playing time anyway, but this just solidifies it. It's going to be with the addition of Adames. He was missing a day here and there. Now he's the second baseman.
The thing that here that like bearing the lead is just Kolton Wong's having a really nice little season. That's the sad part. He's been, Kevin, I share your adoration of Mr. Wong, and I think he showed a lot before he left St. Louis. I think Matheny completely mismanaged him, got in his head, and he had a terrible last season there, but he's always had this in him. And you're looking at a 15-20 pace with a 283-40. That's like a batting average OBP. That's a really valuable piece, especially where he was going to draft. Hopefully he's not gone for too long. But I agree with you on Urias. Worth a flyer. He might get lightning in the bottle for a couple of weeks. Over the long term, if he gets too much playing time, I think he'll get exposed as a replacement level player.
Yeah, I'm worried a little bit about Wong with it being the same injury. Even if things are going well, they might move him a little slower coming back this time. That's my big worry.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, Chris, moving down to Arizona, Madison Bumgarner was placed in the IL this week while Jon Duplantier made his second start of the season. Assuming this helps Duplantier's chances of sticking around in the Arizona rotation, do you have any interest in him or any other potential Diamondbacks rotation replacement?
No.
Moving on.
I mean,
hey, I just wanted to say that question because I was really proud of pronouncing Duplantier's name correctly. So yeah, I don't need any more explanation if you don't want to give any.
It sounded like a great pronunciation, very, very good French there. I had a lot of interest in him a couple of years ago. His profile as a reliever more than a starter, I think. And the Diamondbacks are just, the starting pitchers that you are interested on their team, I don't see them coming up this year. They've got a good wave of some young pitching, but I'll be shocked if they make their ways to the majors this year. Once again, like the thing that's really interesting is that Mad Bum has been, to take a very old fantasy baseball podcast term, he was a fantasy zombie this year, right? That's what Matthew Berry and Nate Ravitch used to say on their ESPN podcast. He was buried, he was dead. People had no interest in him whatsoever. He was free this year. He was beyond free, and shown some signs of life, gotten a little more action on the fastball, and just goes to show you, I think with someone, that's the old Ron Chandler saying, if someone has shown a skill, they own it. And when Madison Bumgarner, if he's available on your leagues and you have ample reserve spots, he's somebody, and if the reports are he's going to come back healthy, I'd stash him. I think he can be a better than league average pitcher, and even on the Diamondbacks. So,
yeah, even on the Diamondbacks. All right, Kevin, moving up the coast to Seattle, Kyle Lewis is on the IL for the Mariners, and Jerry DePota doesn't seem to think he'll be back anytime soon. How worried are you about Lewis, and who would you have your eye on to fill his spot in the Seattle lineup, if anyone?
Yeah, I'm about Lewis, actually. Hopefully we'll see him this year was part of that quote. And some of the timelines I've seen are August 1st at the earliest, and we may not even see him then. So I think we're looking right now at the Trammell, Kelenic, Fraley, and Haniger, those four as the outfielders, and one of them a designated hitter. Even with Kelnic's struggles, this probably gives him a longer leash. I think he's 0 for 35 now, and hopefully he can end that tonight. I think they're on the late game as we're recording. They'll get going here in a little bit. But Fraley is somewhat interesting to me. That he got a little bit of talk when he came up for those few games in 2019. He hit 19 home runs and had 22 stolen bases in a little more than 400 plate appearances at AA and AAA in 2019. And he hasn't had more than 40 plate appearances, 41, I guess he had in 2019 when he did come up, and he was overmatched. And he's at 40 this season. 500 on base percentage at both AAA and the major league level this season. He's not going to walk 37.5% of the time at the major league level as he has so far. So that OBP obviously is coming down, but he does have a little bit of pop, maybe a little more than the projections have him for. I think they have him for just a handful of home runs and stolen bases rest of the season. I could see maybe approaching double-digit home runs if everything goes well for him, and that handful of stolen bases. So outfield, there's been issues, especially in 15-team leagues. There's not as many guys out there as we're used to. He might be worth a shot.
Oh, I mean, that is the biggest pain point for me this entire season has been outfield. More than any other position by far. There's just been a lot of soft tissue injuries out there. Let's say you're losing guys. There's a lot of platoons taking place out there. It's by far the worst position. And Fraley is toolsy. Like there's no doubt about it. Like I can see him, like you could see him being an Austin Slater kind of type, some power, some speed, probably not a great batting average, but I definitely someone maybe to speculate on. If you're in need of an outfielder, he's out there. You could probably get him for pretty cheap. It's not the worst play out there.
Yeah, to Kevin's point, that foursome of Jake Fraley, Taylor Trammell, Jared Kelenic, and Mitch Haniger have all started every game, except for Kelenic missed Wednesday against the lefty. And so that does seem like it's going to be a pretty common foursome between the three outfield spots and the DH spot, at least in the short term moving forward. All right, Chris, we'll stick in Seattle and I wanted to talk to you about your thoughts on Justin Dunn to the IL, and not exactly the timing, but Marco Gonzalez returns to the rotation for the Mariners. How were you stashing Gonzalez anywhere? And is Dunn worth holding on to, or is he more of a drop and see if you can pick him up later type of guy?
I think it depends on your league context. In a TGFBI type of format, I wasn't stashing Gonzalez, and I don't know if I'd stash Dunn. I think it depends on what your bench looks like. If you have any minors guys that you're stashing, if you have any other closers in waiting, it depends on what your build is. In other leagues where I have DL slots, IL slots, I'm not old. I have definitely stashed Gonzalez, and I will stash Dunn. Gonzalez had a really rough start to the year in his first couple starts in April, and then he went 3 straight starts that were pretty solid. And then first start back, he only went 4 innings, but 6 strikeouts, 1 walk, and 4 innings, 1 earned run. I think whatever. It's not like you throw out the first 2 starts, those counted, but I like him as an above average starter, maybe like a number 4 or 5 type starter going forward. And that's where I'd put Dunn if he comes back healthy as well. So Seattle, I feel like Seattle, like Miami, I could be wrong here because I haven't actually checked their park factors, but it feels like it's a good place to pitch this year. And so I think I activated Gonzalez as soon as he got back in, and hopefully Dunn won't be out too long.
I'll be curious personally with Dunn leaving, whether or not Seattle tries to find a way to stick with a 6-man rotation. From my count, they've only got 5 starters right now that you could feel comfortable with, unless they end up going with like a bullpen day in there as well. So if they stick with 5, there might be more. We talk about this every week. It's hard to find a Seattle guy that we feel confident talking about having a 2-start week moving forward. So might be something to keep an eye out for getting a couple extra starts out of those 5 guys with some 2-start options in the future. Kevin, another pitcher talk down in Atlanta. Tucker Davidson was called up by the Braves. Are you interested in Davidson at all after being called up for, I think this was the second time this year?
Maybe in leagues where I'm hurting a little bit for some pitching depth, as with all, I shouldn't say all, but guys like Davidson that we've seen a time or two, and even in the minor leagues, his issue has been the walks that he gives up. But in his 2 starts thus far, he got the Mets and he got the Nationals, and he's only given up 3 earned runs in 11 2/3, and it's nice. What's really nice to me, it doesn't sound as impressive, but with his 2.31 ERA, he's got a FIP just over 4, which doesn't look impressive when you look and you see a 4 is the first number there, but 4.08 is really not bad for, I think, him coming up at this point in the season and giving us innings. That's the big thing, right? We talked about it with Gonsolin. Yeah, he's coming off injury, but a lot of these guys come up, and we've seen it with McClanahan. We've seen it with Logan Gilbert. They're giving us 4 innings a pop, 6 innings and 5 2/3 innings. That's what's encouraging. That's the appealing thing to me. And if he can keep that walk rate down a little bit, there might be something here. He only had 20 innings at AAA before this, so that he's another one of these guys. We've said this all season. I really wish we knew more of what happened last season at the alternate site. But yeah, I think if I need some depth, I'm not going to go out and put a huge bid on him. And he's probably not even my main target in any bids, but I'd put him as my backup on a couple of spots if I'm looking for pitching depth.
He's readily available in TGFBI, 0% rostered right now. Going down to Houston, Chris, Lance McCullers looks like he's much closer to returning to the Astros rotation. And once he does, who do you think gets the bump out of that rotation?
First of all, let's just talk about the Astros for a minute. These guys are... Milwaukee has done a really good job recently, I think, in taking pitchers and turning them into aces. It was Brandon Woodruff 2 years ago. It was Corbin Burns last year, and it's Freddie Peralta this year. I was also hoping it was going to be Adrian Hauser. That hasn't happened yet. But Houston, good God. Like, they've got Greinke, Urquidy, Garcia, Valdez, and Odorizzi in the rotation. They've got Javier in the bullpen. Javier as a 6th starter, basically. Most teams would kill for that. The Yankees certainly would, for example. And then, now you've got McCullers coming back, and McCullers looks like an ace, like potentially. Maybe that's a little strong. Maybe he looks like a legit number 2 fantasy starter like next year. If he comes back and shows the same stuff that he had and remains healthy, he certainly will be. Who knows? I think we're all guessing a little bit here. Probably my best guess is Garcia goes to the bullpen. He's the youngest, has the least experience. I'd love to see Odorizzi go. Maybe they send Jake down to the minors. I don't know what the option situation is there. I doubt it. I think they'll keep him up there because he's pitching when he's a vet. But I think Garcia is probably the one that goes to the bullpen. I don't see them moving Greinke. I don't see them moving Framber. Urquidy's a possibility, but I think it's probably Luis Garcia is the odd man out when McCullers comes back, and it just goes to show whatever Houston's doing with their pitching, it's working.
As long as your name's not Forrest Whitley or Josh James. They've got more positives than negatives down there for sure. I'm just airing my own grievances on some stuff I've had in dynasty leagues.
For sure, but the thing that I would say is, like, a year ago, most people were not singing Framber Valdez's praises. No one was talking about Jose Urquidy. No one was talking about Luis Garcia. A few people maybe were talking about Javier. He might have had the biggest name there. And I think what we should be doing moving forward as fantasy players is, as people get called up in Houston, give them the benefit of the doubt and pounce on anybody who goes in their rotation. Let them prove us wrong. If there's something happens, maybe they have a rash of injuries and someone else gets called up, grab them. Like, whoever it is, just right away and see what happens. Because if you've been doing that, it's like you've been winning every hand of blackjack. Basically, you've been playing at the table.
We'll stick with some unfortunate rotation news. Kevin, Spencer Turnbull exited Friday with forearm tightness. Is there anyone worth watching to fill his spot in the rotation in Detroit?
I don't think so. Unfortunately, it's not going to be Matt Manning. He's given up 11 home runs in the less than 26 innings at AAA. We all had high hopes for him, and he still may be great, but he's not ready right now. So it's definitely not going to be him. And I just don't see Detroit doing anything at this point that I'm really going to be interested in. And as great as the other guys that they've had have come on lately, including Turnbull, was just he was pitching really well. Scooble's pitching well now. Even Casey Mize is looking better. I just don't see anyone else coming at this time that I would be interested in.
All right, something to monitor there moving forward. Again, sticking with the rotations, Kwang Hyun Kim seemingly left his start earlier than expected on Friday. Who fills his rotation spot if he misses any time?
Another guy I've got a lot of, so I was not happy to see that at all. Hopefully he comes back quickly. He was off to a really hot start and he scuffled, and hopefully that the reason for the scuffling is he hasn't been 100%. Once again, we're playing a guessing game here. I have had a man crush on Daniel Ponce de Leon for a minute, more than a minute here. I don't know if they'll go back to him. I think he has very good stuff, but lacks the ability to control it. And so I don't know if they're going to trust him. If it's once again, I think that this is a spot starter too. That makes the most sense. Mikolas is nowhere ready to come back. Dakota Hudson is not ready to come back. Flaherty, they just lost. So they're feeling the pain a little bit. I don't know. It's going to depend on whether, I guess there's a shot they want to show Liberatore this year. They did give up Randy Arozarena for him. So who's not nobody.
Who's that?
Yeah, he's okay. But so I think I don't know if he's ready or how he's doing, but I have thought they're going to bring him up at some point this year. So I don't know if this is the moment or not. I think it probably depends on the extent of Kim's injury. My guess is it's Ponce de Leon or someone of that nature that's just a filler that fills in. But I don't know. Kevin, do you have any other ideas beyond what I'm throwing out there?
But Ponce de Leon was my thought that we might see. And I've been stashing him in a couple spots, even starting him a time or two for a couple of middle relief innings. So I'd be interested to see what he might do.
Yeah, of course, Johan Oviedo just took over Flaherty's spot in the rotation for the time being. So they still got to fill. They still have an opening now that Kim has put on the 10-day IL with back tightness. All right, Kevin, we'll get away from pitchers now and we'll hit up some hitters. It seems as though the Jake Bauers experiment has come to an end in Cleveland, finally, as they designated him for assignment on Saturday and called up Bobby Bradley from AAA. Bradley's only been hitting a .96, 266, 485 through 109 plate appearances in AAA this year, but he's continued to show his power stroke with 9 home runs in his 26 games. Do you see Bradley sticking in Cleveland as a regular first baseman moving forward, and how do you think his skills will translate this time around in the majors? Last time he came up, I believe, was 2019.
Yeah, and he struck out over 40% of the time, and I'm afraid that's one of what may happen again. He's striking out 32% in the minors this season. He did get in the game tonight as a pinch hitter, so he will be available in NFBC leagues tomorrow. That if you are in need of some power that comes with huge batting average risk, obviously, with all of those strikeouts. But as we talked about over the past couple of weeks, that we used to always be able to say we can find power when we need it, as long as we're willing to give up batting average. But this season, in 15-team leagues, it hasn't necessarily been the case. There are not a lot of guys available out there due to all the injuries we've seen. So if you really need power, he's going to be their first baseman, at least for the foreseeable future.
All right. If you don't trust Bradley, it's another first baseman who will be available this week for FAAB. Chris, the Yankees called up Chris Gittens on Saturday, and he started at first base that Saturday night for New York as they hosted the Red Sox. So not a bad way to make your MLB debut by going right into the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry in Yankee Stadium. With DJ LeMahieu moving over to play second base to make way, can you see Gittens carving out regular playing time with Voit out at first and pushing Rougned Odor to the bench on a regular basis?
I can certainly see it. Hard-hitting Chris Gittens. He's 27 years old. He started number 92 for the Yankees, number 92. But I tweeted out tonight, Alec Verdugo got a base hit. great swing on a high fastball off and hit it away from the shift. I just love watching him do that. He's number 99. I was like, I don't remember the first time in June seeing the first baseman and the runner at first both having numbers in the 90s. But that's something in February in Jupiter, Florida. But Gittens is, first of all, he has a very good eye. So he really knows how to take a walk. And second of all, he's got power. And I did not see Adolis Garcia coming. I did not see Yermin Mercedes coming. I did not see, if we want to see Seth, I guess I did see Seth Brown coming. Seth Brown's not that good, especially in a time when you just need at-bats in some leagues, that the plague of injuries this year. I definitely will be betting on Chris Gittens tomorrow in a few leagues, and I assume the Yankees are going to give him a shot. One little side note: his father was interviewed on Saturday night, and his father is a very large man. I will say Chris Gittens probably gets his size from him. And his dad said he has never attended one of his son's professional games until this game in Yankee Stadium, because he told his son when he was drafted that he would only come when he made the majors. And his son has been playing since 2014. This is the first professional game he's seen, and his dad said that's because it's all about putting in work. And at this level, everyone's talented. It's about who works the hardest. So I like the fact that this guy probably has a good work ethic, and his dad and his mom were in the stadium tonight. And it's a great story. And his minor league numbers, he has steadily, for the last 4 years, decreased his strikeout rate, which is probably his biggest bugaboo. And he's also, at the same time, increased his batting average, increased his OBP, and increased his slugging. So the last about 4 years he's been doing that. I'm rooting for him. I wouldn't put a ton of FAAB down on him, but I will definitely put some bids in on him, and hopefully you catch lightning in a bottle, and maybe he's a special story like Garcia or Yermin Mercedes.
He did get put in the lineup, batting 6th for the Yankees so far. They're in the top of the 8th right now. So his night's almost over. He has gone 0 for 3 with a strikeout. So hopefully he can end it on a positive note with his parents in the stadium watching. But we'll see. All right, that's going to do it. That's going to wrap up our news section of the pod. As always, we try to keep it focused on news that might affect your FAAB considerations this Sunday, and we may have left out some important items worth knowing. To stay up to date with all these news and notes, you should listen to the daily First Pitch podcast, hosted by Nick Pollock during the week and Alex Fast on the weekends. It's 15 minutes full of the most important things that happen in baseball the day before, and is a must listen every day to stay up to date with what's going on across the league, including bullpen adjustments, big-time hitter performances, and starting pitcher spotlights by Alex and Nick. All right, we're going to move on from news. And Chris, we wanted to talk, you started this podcast, Bracketology, for the second year in a row. Mm-hmm. And what I really want to talk to you about is, ultimately, there's a lot of podcasts out there. As we saw, your bracket alone grew. You had to do a play-in bracket this year. Yep. With all the Pitcher List Podcast Network has 20 podcasts all by itself.
That was before that dropped.
That's right. So I'm curious to know that you listen to a lot of them. I'm sure you don't listen to all of them. That sounds pretty impossible. I'm sure somebody's tried to do it. I want you to break down like what you have found, or at least you personally, what do you look for in a podcast when you're looking for what makes you come back for more? And is it the information? Is it the personalities? Does one way outweigh the other? What should listeners be looking for when they are trying to pick and choose what podcast they're listening to on a regular basis?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it depends on what kind of player you are. I mean, one of the things that's great is that there's podcasts for everybody. You could be a casual player, you could be a high stakes player, you could be a combo of both. You can prefer head to head, you can prefer dynasty or redraft. There's just so much out there for everyone. And so for me, I've definitely listened to every podcast that's been in my tournament at least once. Most of them, almost all of them, more than once. And I have tongue in cheek, but not really tongue in cheek, put together, like last year, an article on baseball-pods.com called MAPS, M-A-P-S, the 5 tools of fantasy baseball podcasts. And so it's just, for me, the 5 of the things that I look for when I'm trying to figure out what podcasts I'm going to listen to during the day. And just to go over them like really quickly, The M stands for management. I think that we spend so much time on a draft analysis. Everybody goes hard with the draft. What about in-season management? I think it's something personally I struggle with as a fantasy player. I think that's what separates like some of the decent players from some of the great players, how they manage. FAAB is part of it for sure. Part of it is like listening to people talk about how should you be looking at your roster when, how do you use statistics to monitor like how you're doing, to figure out strategically where you should be dumping, where you should be going hard. That type of in-season management talk, I think, is something that is a gold for a fantasy player when they're listening to a podcast. A second one for me is analytics, and almost every podcast I listen to has analytics, but what separates like the good from the great, once again, is people who can actually explain it in like real talk. Like we industry, we have so many abbreviations, we have so many things we just throw for granted. Explain it to me. Like when a lot of times when you're listening to a podcast, you're walking the dog, you're riding a bike, you're on your lunch break. It's like when someone's X whip CS X stats divided by, it's just like you lose it. You have to be able to explain that, I think, in a way that resonates with a lot of people. So it's not just about being smart about analytics. It's about being able to explain it. And the first P is for personality for me. Personality is everything. Like when I think about one of my favorite podcasts of all time was what Kevin Goldstein and did back when he was at Baseball Prospectus. He's got another new podcast out, not about fantasy, but it was with him and Jason Parks back on the Baseball Prospectus, the podcast network. And Jason Parks is, I think, on the Bucks now. I know he started off with the Cubs, and Kevin Goldstein, was famously with the Astros. So they certainly knew what they were talking about, but their personalities what drew you back. It felt like you were part of a family. Like I knew about Kevin's struggles to lose weight and his fedora wearing, and I knew about Jason's love of a very specific Mexican beer that you can only get in California or Mexico. And it's just like, it's those like little details that I think pull people back and make you feel like you're part of a club. And personality doesn't mean fake. It means like just being authentic. You don't have to be loud. You have to be yourself. If you're not a loud person, don't be loud. But Todd Zola's got an incredible personality. He makes fun of himself all the time. I wouldn't say he's like some big boisterous personality, but he certainly has a personality, and it comes through, and it kind of resonates, and it makes you feel like you're coming back to it. The second P for me is prospects. I quite frankly don't know how you can do a fantasy baseball podcast these days and not have at least an understanding or a knowledge or an acknowledgement of we need to be paying attention to prospects. And that was not the case even 3 to 5 years ago, to be honest. But now, like you guys talk about it, like who's going to get called up. This stuff matters, and we know a lot more than we did 3 to 5 years ago. Even the StatCast data that's out there, all the different new guns that are out there, the proliferation of minor league and prospect reporting. There's so much of it out there; it's almost overwhelming. But if you're not acknowledging that and incorporating that into your analysis, your listeners are definitely missing out. And the last point, S, is around strategy. I think too often we don't talk about strategy, and strategy doesn't have to be like, hey, we're going to talk about a whole section on strategy. It's okay. This guy, I'm going to pick up this guy like we were talking about earlier. Who are you going to pick up? Are you going to pick him up in a 12-team league, a 15-team? Like it's different strategy for different leagues. We have so many different contexts. And so I think that you actually need to talk about what your strategy is, whether it's in your FAAB strategy or your trading strategy, whatever your leagues, the league that you're really catering to. I think you need to have some strategy talk as a part of it. So those are like the 5 components for me that like bring me back. Personality is probably number 1, to be honest. Like I love Under the Radar, which is an athletic podcast with Derek Van Riper, Nader Defino, and Ian Khan. And they do really focus on under the radar guys. Like they were in on Yermin, they were on Adolis, they're in on, if you wanted to, probably what's the big reliever from DeMarcus Evans. They're in on like those kind of under the radar guys. That's what they specialize in. But most of the reason I listen to that show is because I laugh. It's funny, but it's just
conversation.
Yeah, that's right, Kevin. It's just like, and the same thing with Nick and Alex. Like they have an amazing rapport, and one of my favorite episodes that I will always look out for is if either Nick and or Alex, you're talking to Justin Mason and or Paul Sporer. Like that is a must listen podcast, because sometimes it's the funniest thing in the world, and then sometimes it's edge of your seat like listening because they're really serious and they're in like the mood to argue, and like, but that's what brings you back, right? Because there's 10,000 podcasts. I'm like, those personalities are what bring you to the table.
Oh yeah, it's like there's always these, at least with them, it always comes back to the almost ongoing inside jokes, if you will, that kind of go on from like week to week. The whole, when Justin Mason called Alex Fast on the phone and left him a voicemail about Caleb Smith. And then they did it live on the show a week later. That whole back and forth, I still remember that. I think it was over a year ago at this point.
Yeah,
but
totally.
like, it's still fresh.
Totally. And then it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And then like last year, I still remember this. And I've told all four of these guys this. I was in a conference in Los Angeles in it must have been January 2020 because it was before COVID. And I remember like I was supposed to do something like really important. And I started listening to their podcast and it was like the Samardzija episode. And Paul and Justin were like all in on Samardzija, and like Alex and Nick were not. And Nick was, I think Alex was there. Nick was definitely not. But it was like tense. And I was like, I'm supposed to go to this really important presentation, but I need to find out, like, are these guys okay? Like, it sounds like they're really mad at each other. And like at the end of the day, it's fun and they're good. But also, let's just be serious. Like a lesson I learned from the podcast tournament, and one of the reasons next year, like, you're going to have to fill out a little form to make sure you want to be in the tournament, is like, most people do want to be in, let's be clear. But there's some people that are like, but I just don't want that attention. I don't want that competition. Because people, even though it's just a stupid online baseball podcast tournament, people take real pride in their work. So it's the reason it's so like that episode sticks with me is because while I know those guys love each other and respect the hell out of each other, there was like authentic tension there because they both had pride in their points of view. And that's what was so compelling about it. And so it was respectful and it was funny and it was, but it was just like, that draws you in and keeps you there. And that's what you want, I think. If you really draws your audience in, that kind of a compelling, and it can't be fake drama and it can't be anything. It's got to be authentic. That's people understand what authenticity sounds like, and that's what draws them in. So I always tell people, don't try to be who you're not. Like, figure out what your personality is and do that, and find the people who like that. And then just do that to the extreme so that they like that. And don't worry about everyone who doesn't like you, because you're never going to please everyone.
Yeah, that's for sure. Especially if you write anything online that allows for comments or reviews, you'll always know that you can't please everyone. I've been writing a lot more this season over at pitcherlist.com. And with that comes more comments. And you read them and you're like, okay, cool. Thank you for clicking and reading my article, and we'll move on. And other times, obviously, you get more positive criticism,
constructive
or criticism you can actually use.
Yeah,
which is always a positive thing. Yeah, I listened to plenty of podcasts myself long before I started, this show with Kevin. The things that I looked for is ones that it's going to sound weird. One thing I don't think you touched on is the quality of the work that's coming through. Not only the topics you're talking about or the content, but just like how easy it is to actually listen to the people talking. Not only do they get along and do they feed off of each other, but is the quality of the sound good? Like, listen, I think Jeff Zimmerman just tweeted this out over the weekend or yesterday, talking about how he's about to go mow his lawn. And that means have a couple beers and listen to a bunch of podcasts. That's exactly what I do every other Sunday when I mow my lawn. I can get in as many podcasts as my lawn will allow. I've got my headphones only go so high to get over my lawnmower, and it's electric lawnmower, so it's not that loud, but you still have to get there. And so the quality matters a lot in that respect. If I can't hear you, I'm probably going to move on.
100%. And like Chris Welsh is someone who really harps on that, I think, appropriately. And he's a pro. Chris is a pro. He's like a real radio pro. Like, you can tell when he talks, this guy like knows what he's doing. I would like you could hear him on whatever if you turn on the radio, it's whatever the most popular station is in any media market in America, and you heard his voice, you'd be like, okay, this guy's a pro. Like, he fits. But and I will say, most people have stepped up their game on this in the last couple of years, especially. But and I'm never going to throw anyone out there and name names. People call me up or email me or DM me and say, hey, give me feedback on this. One of the number one things is about quality that I'll give them feedback on. And there have been a couple of years ago, there was a really major site and all their stuff was like mediocre at best. And I was like, it's embarrassing. Like, the guy reached out to me and he was like, tell me about this. I was like, you guys have really good content, but the sound quality is like trash. And they've gotten better since then. And there's still like a couple of major sites. If you listen to some shows, where it's not just the sound quality in terms of the audio quality. They're not even trying to entertain you. It doesn't sound like they're just talking in a way that is so slow and it's painful to listen to. So to me, that's the exception. Most people, I think, are pretty damn good on this at this point, or at least acceptable. But I think it is something where the industry has come a long way in the last couple of years. And I definitely have and out of the three of us, I have the worst audio setup. So hopefully I'm not like living in a gigantic glass house right now.
I think Kevin and I both steal our respective wives' office areas to do our podcasting. So it's not all us. We can thank them for some of the setup.
You're better halves.
Yeah. All right, Chris, that's all great stuff. I appreciate the insight on that. And of course, like we mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to read Chris's full excerpt on do you pronounce it MAPS? Is it just MAPS?
Yeah, it's just MAPS. Yeah, it's MAPPS. I mean, it's like I said, it's anybody, by the way, anyone wants any feedback on their show, DM me. I've given it to the biggest podcasts that are out there with the largest networks in the world. And I've also given it to people who have just recorded their first podcast and asked me for feedback. That's mine. I always tell people it's one person's opinion, take it or leave it. I do listen to probably as many podcasts as anyone except for Yancey. And if anyone values my opinion, I'm happy to share it and they can take it or leave it. If you're listening and you want feedback on your podcast, just let me know and I'm happy to give it to you. And privately, by the way.
Yeah, so you, of course, DM Chris over on the Twitter at Baseball Pods and check over the full article and all of his other great work over at his website, www.baseball-pods.com. Again, there's a link in the show description. You guys can click that for a direct link as well.
By the way, I've been trying to I just tweeted this tonight. I've been working on my Dynasty rankings. I do Dynasty rankings. I did some in I think it was April. It's so hard right now, man.
I saw you tweet
it is. I saw that, and I was just nodding as I read it.
It's so hard. I'm like, what do I do with these people? What do I do with Adolis Garcia? Who is he? You know what I mean? What do I do with Luis Castillo? Is this real? What is going on? But especially the prospects are really hard, and the guys that are breaking out who were invisible to us last year are so hard. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. That's what I feel. And that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long. And I saw Ian Kahn put out his Dynasty list, which he's amazing. James Anderson put one out. Eric Cross has one out. And there's a couple of other independent sites that have put some out. And I do it like 2 or 3 times a year, mostly for my own, because I love Dynasty is probably my favorite format. But I put that list out there for the public and get a lot of feedback on it. And I thought I was going to be done by maybe the end of the first week in May. And I dug in and I was just like, I don't know. Like, I can't make my mind up yet. I keep on moving people around, up and down, back and forth. Hopefully I'll make my mind up at some point this month to be able to put something out there that's fresh on the website.
Yeah, I think I heard James Anderson did his last podcast with Ian Kahn, and he usually says this, like when he does his Dynasty rankings, like he thinks about, would I trade this guy for this guy? That's a good way of, like, once you think you're done, go through the list and do that. So personally, since we're in a Dynasty league together, Chris, I will be looking for your updated ranks to see maybe what offers I can send your way. We'll see. So when those are out, let me know. All right, let's move to the meat of the podcast here. Our player recommendations section, as we typically will do, we'll go category by category. You got 3 hitter categories, 3 pitcher categories, and then some wild cards in there as well. So let's get right to some hitters that we may find available that can add some power to your lineup. As Kevin mentioned, I think last week, this is the time, or 2 weeks ago, actually. This is the time where you really got to start looking at your categories, where standings are really starting to not solidify, but they're starting to, thicken up a little bit. They're not moving around as freely in most leagues. And so if you find a way that you can jump any type of categories to get the most amount of points and move up your standings, this is the time to start doing that. So let's start with power. Home runs, RBIs, stuff like that. Kevin, give me some names that we should be on the lookout, whether we've talked about them in the news section or not. Who should we be looking out for this week for power guys?
We were prepping for the show. I had Gittens on there and Bobby Bradley, who we've talked about a little bit. Over the past couple of weeks, we've talked about Joe Adell, and all he did was hit at least 4 more home runs this week. That was coming into today. So he's up to 14 on the season. I think he leads all of minor league baseball. He's still striking out a ton. He's still struggling in the batting average department. But other than Justin Upton, due to injuries, the Angels outfield is horrible. So we may see him soon, just if he keeps hitting home runs. We've talked about that. I thought that people might be a little skeptical of Haas getting some power from the catcher position, but he hit 2 more today. That's over. We're not sneaking him in anymore. 5 home runs was enough. He probably was going to get rostered in most leagues this weekend, and now it's most definite. Patrick Wisdom is really interesting to me, and part of what's interesting is we've had some great baseball stories this season. Chris talked about Mercedes and Adolis Garcia, and if Wisdom keeps hitting, he's another one. He was 21st overall pick, a first rounder by the Cardinals, but clear back in 2012. And now to have 5 home runs in 12 games, like a lot of these guys, it comes with a strikeout rate. We don't know what kind of average he's going to hit for, but he's somebody I'm rooting for. And fantasy baseball is fun. That's why we play in the first place. Now you might get into some high stakes things later on, but the origin of this is fun. So I'm rooting for Patrick Wisdom, going to try to add him in some spots where I can. And I think, the other guys that I was thinking about, we talked about earlier in the news and notes section.
There's some good names in there, of course. Yeah, Haas not getting under the radar for this week. He has been.
I was hoping.
He has been he was a popular pickup in the main event last week, or actually it might have been 2 weeks ago. So he's been on the radar for a bit, at least in those paying deep attention. Chris, have you seen any power guys pop up that you'll be keeping an eye out for, at least putting on your watch list when you do your bids on Sunday?
I think Kevin hit most of them. I think DJ Stewart's getting a lot of playing time right now, and he's been hitting pretty well. He could get hot, and when the weather gets hot in Baltimore, it's usually good for those bats down there. So I would just add him. And then I'm always a sucker for Garrett Cooper. He's been swinging the bat a lot better than he did after a slow start. He's one of my guys I like, and I just think he's a really good professional hitter. Probably not a full-time hitter, but someone who, if he can go on streaks and carry your team for a little while. So I just add those 2 guys to the mix. But I agree with Kevin's picks.
All right, that's good. The only name I'm gonna throw in there, and this is kind of a little bit of a segue into the speed section, is Harold Ramirez, outfielder for Cleveland. He's been getting a lot of run lately in the last couple of weeks. Only 5% rostered in TGFBI, so still readily available in a lot of 15-teamers. And even with the addition of Bradley Zimmer, he's still playing just about every day. He's batting in the middle of the lineup, 3rd to 4th every single day. Can add an all-around game to, as long as he continues to play on a regular basis and kind of volume his way into some power production. He's stolen, I think, 2 bags already this season as well. So he does have a little bit of speed as an option in there, and Cleveland does have some positive matchups in that department moving forward. So I'm going to give a shout out to Harold Ramirez, especially in your deeper leagues. Speaking of that, Kevin, you list the same guy that I listed in my speed article, and that is the aforementioned Bradley Zimmer for a speed option. Why do you like Zimmer? Maybe for different reasons that I might have put.
Yeah, I know in your article you dive a lot more into schedule and the opponent's proficiency at preventing stolen bases and that type of thing. I just think Bradley Zimmer is the only option Cleveland has in center field right now. Mm-hmm. So he's going to get the playing time. He's going to hit at the bottom of the order. Fortunately, he's in the American League, and they're going to let him run. He's got 3 on the season, 2 of them in the past 7 or 8 games, and I think we'll continue to see that as the season progresses.
Yeah, I like Zimmer. I do like Cleveland's matchups. The only negative, of course, is that Cleveland is one of the few teams that only has a 5-game slate next week. So both of these options aren't going to get you, at least in the first half of the week. Only going to see 2 games. But in an FBC where you can swap them out, at least they get the full 3 games over the weekend, which is nice. As I mentioned in my article, when they do face off against Seattle, Luis Torrens, their catcher there, is not very good. He's only at a 10% caught stealing rate on the season. So he's allowed 19 stolen bases and only thrown out 2 guys or would-be base stealers. So somebody to take advantage of this week as you're looking for speed options. If your guys on your roster are playing Seattle at any given time, that's somebody that you can try to hopefully take advantage of. Chris, are you looking at any other speed options on your wires coming?
I wish there was more. I just want to say on Zimmer, I have been a couple of really deep places and have held him. He's got like elite pedigree. He's just never been able to put it together. And he's got power and speed. And so I think he's a great, everyone's talking about guys we root for. I root for that guy. He's had a series of injuries and hopefully he finally gets his spot. There's no one else that's out there I think is, oh yeah, you got to go add this guy if you want speed. But I will say we should check out Akil Badu. He started off the feel-good story of the year. And then he tailed off, but now he's back up to 241. He's got 5 homers. He's got 5 steals. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire in terms of stolen bases, but just in terms of overall production, he's going to play, I think, most of the time, and he's hitting. And for a while, it looked like, oh, this is just going to be the typical come up, get hot, everyone figures you out. The pitcher's made the adjustment on him, and he's made some adjustments back. So just someone just in general to keep your eye on, and a guy with 5 steals on it. Anyone that has 5 steals, that's a stolen base threat in today's environment. So I just throw him out there.
Yeah, I've been concerned about Badu just because he hasn't been playing as often as when he was. He's been sitting definitely against lefties, but also against a couple of righties as well in the last week. You'd think at the very least he should be on the strong side of the platoon. So hopefully he gets back to that at least semi everyday playing time. The one thing about Badu is Rule 5 pick. He's not getting sent back down.
Exactly.
So he's not going to get 100% of his playing time cut. So that's good.
Yeah, and I should have said, just back to my earlier point about adding context, he's definitely a very deep league or AL only play for me. But I think a lot of people have totally cut bait on him because they look like, okay, it was over, and I don't think it's over. I think he's someone interesting to keep your eye on.
All right, Kevin, anybody else in the speed department you want to mention?
I'm somewhat interested in Jonathan India in the few places he may be available. He had a decent week. He'd been struggling there for a little while. He's still getting the playing time. And then this week, he's had a pretty nice week, including a stolen base, 3 multi-hit games. And he's a guy that fantasy players have given up on that I may be taking a look at the post-hype. I love post-hype guys.
Yeah. Plus, he looks like a pirate.
That always helps. That always helps. If you got to pitch to a pirate, and it's a little intimidating, at least for the younger pitchers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Cincinnati has a 6-game slate. That's good. I have been noticing he has been a little bit hotter. He is available in 2 or 3 different TGFBI leagues. Check your wires again even in your deep leagues. He might have been dropped. As Kevin mentioned, he has struggled for a little bit after a quick hot start at the beginning of the season. So somebody who needed to make room might have cut bait on India and might be worth a stash there. All right. Any other hitters that you guys are looking at? Chris, I'll start with you. That might have just a really good opportunity in front of them. Whether they have some good matchups coming up, maybe they don't wow you in any particular category. They might not be a pure power guy, pure speed guy, but they might be looking at a lot of playing time. They might be traveling to Coors. Might be not. Buffalo is still a pro pitcher, pro hitters park. Not as much as Dunedin was, but a couple other park factors to consider in that situation. Any other guys that you have your eye on that worth taking a look at in that area?
It is slim pickings. Harold Ramirez was going to be one of the guys because I think he is an overall complete player to take a look at in terms of, hey, this is someone who because he does a little bit of everything. And I mentioned we kind of touched on both of them. I think Trammell has an opportunity if he gets hot. I talked about DJ Stewart as well. The other person who's out there, and I think once again this is for very deep leagues, but if you need power, I think he might end up not getting he won't get full-time at bats, but he might give you full-time power numbers as Pujols. Albert Pujols is still out there in a lot of places, and he's someone who I definitely will have to bid on in a couple of places because of the extent of injuries that are available. And I don't think he's the worst bet that you can place out there. Not someone I'm going hard after at all. I want to be clear about that. And then a younger player who falls a little bit more into the speed category that I've been playing in a number of places is Brett Phillips in very deep leagues in Tampa. Once again, not going to get full-time at bats, but he's going to swipe you some bags and you might get lucky, pop a homer for you over the course of the week. But the message that I'm sending everybody is that it's slim pickings out there on the waiver wire for bats. That's really the way I feel about it.
Yeah, especially in those leagues that like the NFBC, that you have 5 outfield spots that you have to fill on a regular basis. We talk about that a lot, how outfield is slim pickings. We got to also keep in mind that I play in plenty of Yahoo leagues where there's only 3 or 4 outfield spots, and it's not as bad. I can stream an outfielder on a pretty regular basis, not to mention that 75% of the league is available in the outfield in Yahoo just because it's available. And if a player asks nicely, Yahoo probably gives them the availability to play there. Something I just want to throw out there, Kevin, before I get your take, just as a reminder, everybody, like I said, there's a couple teams that only have 5 games next week, but there's even less that have a full 7-game slate. So checking your wires for batters that might be available in Boston, Kansas City, and Miami. Have their 7-game slate because Miami and Boston are doing that makeup game on Monday, so that fills in there what would have been an off day. So it's nice for Miami going into an American League stadium to start off the week, getting an extra bat available. So Kevin, anybody either on any of those teams or anybody else that you think have a pretty good opportunity moving forward for the next week?
Yeah, Chris actually brought him up in passing earlier, and it's Austin Slater. He's nearly universally owned in TGFBI. He is available in a couple of leagues, but he's only 6% rostered in Yahoo. And I know it's due to playing time. I understand that. And you do have to be careful with your other counting categories. It's not just about home runs and stolen bases, but he has 7 of each at the 1/3 point. So that's a 20-20 guy. That's valuable. You have to be careful not falling too far behind in runs and RBI if you have too many guys like that. But Austin Slater, in my mind, is more valuable than to only be rostered in 6% of shallower leagues.
Austin Slater, he seems like a really good guy in a daily format, and where you can actually pick and choose when he's going to go into your lineup, because he hasn't been the playing time hasn't been there lately. He's missed a couple of games, but it's nice to be able to, when he's been producing every game, at least as of late, when he is in there. So if he's playing,
they do face 3 lefties this week as well.
So there's that opportunity that we talk about. All right, that's going to do it for our hitter section. We'll move on to pitchers now. Moving on to our starters, or at least guys that are going to give you wins and Ks. Typically, this will be our 2 starters, guys that might vulture a win as a follower, which I know are hard to predict. We might have just a really good single matchup coming up for the next week. Kevin, do you see anybody moving forward for this week worth throwing in a decent bid on to rack up some extra wins and Ks?
My first guy in leagues where he's available, we already talked about, that was the juicy matchups with Pittsburgh and Texas for Gonsolin. Chris Bubik for Kansas City, still available in a few leagues, and they get at the depleted Angels lineup, and then a trip to Oakland for the Royals this week. And there was one other guy. I got him written down here. Goodness.
Well, at least with Bubik, it's nice to, after that really strong stretch that he just put together, that if he wasn't picked up last week after that, this past start he just had should hopefully keep his bidding down this coming weekend. So we talk about all the time that we hope a closer doesn't get a save over the weekend and bring up his price. Bubik might have done the same thing here on his start, even though he's got 2 starts coming up next week. His last start, not that great. And hopefully that keeps his bidding down for those who are interested for those matchups.
Yeah, and another guy that is surprisingly available in a few 12-team leagues is Adbert Alzolay. And he gets at San Diego. That could be tough. And then back home with St. Louis, not the best matchups in the world. I was just shocked to see that he was available in a few spots. Definitely not in 15-teamers, but it's worth taking a look.
I've been surprised at that. I've picked him up over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks in, I think, 3 different 12-teamers. And so I was, each time I'm like, who do I stream here? Wait, Alzolay is still available to be streamed?
You always say it. Always look. Don't assume.
Always look. All right, Chris, any starters out there or anybody you think that could rack up a couple extra wins and Ks for your rosters for the next week?
Yeah, and once again, to the previous point, the players are mostly owned, but I play in a number of leagues where I'm bidding on them, so they're not universally owned. And I think they've got, if I'm right, they're probably at least 25% not rostered. So check, and maybe one of them will be available in your league. Austin Gomber has been pretty good, all jokes aside. Everyone got Gombered and whatnot, but he's at Miami. He's been good since his getting roughed up in cores. He's somebody I have on a couple of teams, and I will play in a couple of teams. Cole Irvin is another guy that's been a little back and forth, was really hot for a while, came back down to earth. He plays the Royals. He's available I think in a number of leagues, once again, at about that 70, 75 percentile ownership. Wade Miley playing the Rockies. You talked about earlier, if you can get the Rockies away from Coors, that's one of the best matchups there is. He's, I think, owned in less than 1 in 4 of 12 teamers, and so he's available also in a lot of 15-teamers. So I think there's we talked about Marco Gonzalez. A lot of people did not hold him. He is available in a lot of places. So he's someone else I would take a look at. And then a fifth person who's probably more owned because he is a fantasy darling of many, including me. I'm a member of the hashtag Yarb Bros. But Ryan Yarbrough, I believe in those skills. I think he's going to be really nice at the end of the year. He's been a little up and down more recently. He just had an amazing outing. So take a look and see if he's out there. We're talking about stashes later, right? Not right now, because there's also a couple of stashes.
We'll get there.
Right? So, yeah. But for this coming week, that's a lot of people that we just threw out that you should check. And odds are 1 or 2 of those guys will be available in your league. And then, I'm sorry, the last one I forgot to mention was Justice Sheffield at Detroit, one of our favorite lineups to pick on. Probably odds are owned in the majority of leagues, but he's not 100% owned guy. And so what I like to do is go out every week, and every league is different, and find out, okay, we probably just threw 8 names at you. If you're playing in a 15-team league, probably 3 to 4 of them are going to be available. So figure out who those are, and make your bets accordingly. And you never know. In one of my leagues, I think 6 of those guys are available. You just never know what your league's dynamics will be. So take a look.
Well, what's nice about that, Chris, is when you do find 5 or 6 even guys that are similar, or you'd be happy with any one of them, it allows you to save a lot of FAAB dollars. So you're right. Instead of spending $50 or $60 on a guy you really want, you can go down to $15, $20, $25 on all of them and just be happy whichever one slips through to you. And so you're right. As I'm scrolling through at least TGFBI, Cole Irvin of that group is the most rostered at 95%, but Sheffield was at 85%. Miley was at 61%. So these guys are, I will even venture to say, readily available, and more than one of these guys are going to be available in a majority of 15-teamers, making them widely available across 12-teamers and lower than that. So those are all good names. Let's move forward. We're going to scroll down a little bit on the show notes, and we'll skip right to the future 2-start pitchers. So this list I put together are pitchers that are currently, and I stress currently, scheduled to possibly get 2 starts for the week of June 14th. Obviously, with all the injuries that we see, all the rainouts that we see this time of year, this obviously could change, but we'll go with this list for now. Chris, I'll start with you. Of this list, and these are guys that are only rostered in 50% or less of Yahoo leagues. So I'm sticking away from the aces that are scheduled to go 2 starts and guys that you're not even there's no chance that they're on your waiver wires. So of this list, give me, can you pick out at least 1 or 2 targets of yours, and then give me one guy that you might be fading that you think might be a little bit more on the popular side?
So I want to call a really quick audible and just let you know one of my best friends is at the Bowie Hartford game, and Adley Rutschman just hit a walk-off. So one of the prospects that
I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with that.
Just want to let you know, I've got video of it on my phone. Adley, and I think DL Hall pitched tonight for Bowie. But God, I love minor league baseball. Isn't it great to get back? I just wanted to shout out minor league baseball. Gomber is the guy for me, one of the guys that I trust, trust is a strong word for Austin Gomber, but I think he's a good pitcher, and if you can get him, he's someone I would look at. Although now that I'm saying that, because I was distracted by Rutschman, I see these are both home starts, so I'm going to totally change my mind. I ignore what I just said completely, and instead go with Marco Gonzalez. He's the one I would pick at home against Minnesota and Tampa. That's the top guy on my list. One that I would fade here is Gutierrez. I think he's had a nice start, but that strikeout, there can only be one John Gant, I think, and someone that walks almost as many as he strikes out, and yet somehow has an ERA around the 1. Unless Vladimir Gutierrez is taking lessons from Gant, I think at Milwaukee and at San Diego could be a come up. And I'll take Marco for the guy I'll pick, and Gutierrez for the guy I think some people might be picking, but I'll fade.
All right, Kevin, same question. Hopefully you got different answers, but if you want to double down on anybody Chris mentioned, obviously go ahead. Who you like on this list? And obviously you can cross off Cody Petite, who I had put on here and forgot to cross him off.
I think my favorite one is we talked about him last week, a guy that struggled early and was a popular name in draft season and then had his struggles and is available now, and that's Zach Davies. I wouldn't start him this week at San Diego probably, although he might be comfortable there, having played there for most of a season. But at the Mets and then versus Miami, I'd love that for next week. And he will be more expensive next week than this week, which is your entire purpose of putting this together each week. He's a perfect example. People aren't going to pick him up when he's going to San Diego. So I like him a lot for this. And if I have a spot and I need a couple of this is really chasing. There's risk here, but I've always been a fan of Griffin Canning. And with one of those starts being against Detroit in a couple of weeks, I would consider that. So if I had a spot where I could pick him up for next to nothing this week and then ponder that over the next week, if I wanted to try to withstand the at Oakland start to get the Detroit, that's something that I would definitely consider.
Yeah, in the same vein, J.A. Happ has a two-step schedule for next week, going at Seattle and at Texas. He just faced the Yankees this coming week. So again, it might be a guy that you look at to stash, put on your bench for this week, and then take advantage of that two-step. Those matchups, regardless of what Happ might be doing, those matchups are very tempting. And he's readily available at TGFBI. I think he's 63% rostered, so he's readily available in a good chunk of those leagues. So check your wires for that as well. All right, we'll move on to some ratio guys. Some might be a long reliever with some opportunity ahead of them. Guys that can help you chip away at ERA and WHIP, because if you're going to chip away at those ratios, you got to start now. A lot harder to chip away those at the end of the season as it is to do that on a regular basis. Kevin, we'll start with you. Any guys out there that you trust to put up some low ERAs or WHIPs for you this coming week?
Yeah, I like Ryan Thompson. We typically stray away from Rays, especially if we were looking for saves. We don't know who is going to get the opportunities, and he's got none of them. So he's not one of the guys that is being stashed by people.
He's due.
Yeah, possibly. He could actually, he could stumble into one or two here soon, especially with all the injuries that keep occurring. We keep bringing that up. But the thing I like about him is that there's almost always a strikeout in his appearance, and many times multiple strikeouts, and he's up to 25 innings. So he's looking at 75 innings on the season. He's the type of guy you can throw in there when you need a sixth or seventh pitcher, or in some cases, some of my teams, eighth or ninth, where I don't have anybody that's actually in line for saves at this point. So he's the type of guy you can throw in there. Hopefully you get one, maybe a win, but you're definitely usually looking at a strikeouter.
Yeah, Kevin, a guy like that reminds me of the question I asked you, I think last week, about when do we start seeing some closers getting dropped by teams that are really well ahead in the saves category. And guys like Thompson can take the place of them, so you can still continue to chip away at the ratios without kind of worrying about the saves. I saw Edwin Diaz was dropped in a main event league last week, and Hansel Robles as well in a single league. So it's starting to happen. It's probably not going to be a mass dropping per se, because saves are so hard. And I talked about that in my article about how difficult, what a poor decision, but like a decision you don't want to make lightly this early in the season, because not just because you're ahead in saves doesn't mean you want to give somebody else in your league the ability to chip away at that category, because it's probably a lot closer for somebody a couple spots below you to jump up a save or two and then gain points in the standing. They might not jump you in the category if you're that high above, but if they can chip away and get more points, they could jump over you in the overall standings. So something
absolutely
lately there. But when that case does arrive, when you do feel a bit more comfortable doing that, bringing in a reliever like Thompson makes a lot of sense to at least continue chipping away at those ratios. Chris, anybody else that you're looking at the wires that might be able to do that for your rosters?
I look at Scott Barlow. He's available pretty widely. Kansas City is definitely a bullpen in flux. He's gotten a save in the last week, which puts him in the mix. Walks more guys than you want him to, but strikes out a lot of people, has great ratios otherwise. Another guy that is just someone you might have to pay a little bit for Barlow. Another guy I think is basically free that I think is a good pitcher on a team that's contending with a lot of holds that we talked about earlier is Genesis Cabrera on the Cardinals. The Cardinals are hurting. Those we think, oh, the starting pitchers are hurt. Okay, that means that the bullpen's going to be more taxed. And so in the starting bullpen, we don't often think of, well, okay, this is the bullpen, the starter rotation is hurt. The bullpen has more opportunities for wins. The bullpen has more opportunities for innings. And so Cabrera is a guy that he's got really good skills, and he's basically off most people's radars, and you can get him for free. And if you need, I'd rather throw him in there than a starter like an SP6 with a questionable matchup. Just someone else to keep on your radar.
I think that's a great call out in the fact that looking at those rotations that are really hurting, you mentioned obviously St. Louis, but we talked about Miami earlier in the show. So I think that's a good call out for just opportunity for those really strong relievers in those bullpens to get a little bit more work. And sometimes all you need is that volume to volume your way into an extra 2 or 3 strikeouts in the week, or that those scoreless innings add up and chip away a lot stronger at your ERA and your WHIP when that happens. So good call out there, Chris. Let's get a little bit more specific, and we are looking for saves. It is still a category. Kevin, what bullpens are you looking at for specifically for saves? I know we talked about a couple of guys that might luck into a save or two just based on what bullpens they're in. But is there a guy right now that you think either is about to get the job, has the job, or could get into the job, or at least the conversation moving forward next week that you might be bidding on?
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot over the last couple of weeks that the amazing run of saves that Valdez got in Baltimore was probably coming to an end. And it seemed like everybody was running out and grabbing Sulcer after what he did last season. And it appears the guy might actually be Paul Fry. He's got the most recent saves for them. And my favorite thing when I pull up his game log, when I did earlier today, a whole long list of appearances, mostly zeros. What I really like is most of his earned runs were in one appearance. The blowups are going to happen. They happen to the elite closers once in a while. That's what I like to see. The runs were all given up in one appearance, and strikeouts in every appearance, multiple strikeouts in most of those appearances. This is a guy that I could see very well sticking with the job. As crazy as this bullpen situation has been all season, that they might actually have their guy now.
It is notable that I don't know if it's notable or not, but just as a note, Hunter Harvey did return to Baltimore, being activated from the 60-day IL this week as well. So another name in that fray, if you will. Yes, Fry did get the last save for Baltimore. I question how many saves is Baltimore actually going to get, but if you're at a point where you're like, I don't care, I'll take one save in the next 3 weeks because that every save is going to make it that much of a difference. It's a situation you got to monitor for sure. Chris, any other bullpens? You mentioned Barlow recently in the last section, but any other specific bullpen arms that you think could add some saves to your rosters?
Yeah, in general, I think check out the Baltimore bullpen. Harvey, depending on your league, if you have bench spots for him in TGFBI, maybe not unless you're really desperate. But I wouldn't give up on either Sulcer or Harvey for saves for the year, nor would I give up on Barlow in deeper leagues. It's probably in a 12-team league. I'm not sure. I have not looked at his pronunciation, but Feyarazian in Tampa. He's probably going to be available in a decent amount of 12-teamers. It's probably taken. Do I believe Tampa is going to give him the ball for the rest of the year in the 9th inning? No questions asked? Hell no. Do I think he could get 5 saves in the next 5 weeks or 3 weeks? Yes, I do. And that can make a big difference. In a slightly shallower leagues, I would take a look at him. And then there are some of my 15-team leagues, just because of the volatility of the Reds bullpen, Sims has been cut in some places. So make sure he's not on your waiver wire, because I have been Mr. Amir Garrett since the beginning of the season. I root for him because I think he's a good pitcher, also a good person and a strong personality, and I like that in my closers. It has not worked out. I do not think. I think he is. I think Lucas Sims is going to be the closer there, most likely for the rest of the season. If I had to put my money down on one person, it would be him. Maybe Antone gets in and out of there, but make sure Sims is not out there because of the volatility of that situation. A week ago may seem like a long time ago, but in Reds bullpen days, it's not. So take a look.
Yeah, I like the Fire Eisen call out only because I was able to pick him up earlier last week in a different league. I was disappointed to see that he seemed well rested going into today, but was not used at all. Diego Castillo got the save today on Saturday for the Rays, which isn't terribly surprising. It's Diego Castillo still, but not to see him not being used at all was a little disheartening.
But I think the way that we need to look at most relief pitchers these days is you're not trying to get a closer, you're trying to get 40% of a closer. And that's why I say if you don't say, and that's why, and you also shouldn't bid on in FAAB as if you're paying for a full closer in most of these cases. But if you can find 3 or 4 of these guys and you put in smaller bids, to talk a little bit earlier about what we were talking about, Adam, and you get one of them and they give you 2 or 3 saves over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you got your values worth
it.
And,
yep.
And you're going to have to hustle, though. This is going to be a churn. This is not going away.
Absolutely. I think that finishes up our pitchers. We will go into our 2, I guess we call them our wild card sections. Wild card player. This is any player at all, a speculative ad. It might be a stash. It might be just a player that we didn't have a chance to talk about in any one of the particular categories that kind of interests you for any particular reason. That's our last. We'll go with that last. I'm going to skip ahead and ask you guys to give me a prospect that you expect to get the call either this week or or at least the next 2 weeks. And Kevin, I'm gonna tee you up a little bit. And the guy that I think a lot of people want to know about is Jackson Cower out of Kansas City, your boy. And tell me if you think he's worth the stash. I just bid on him. I grabbed him in my Otnu league, which I've learned the hard way is not the type of league that you want to stash too many players. You run out of money real quick there. But I do have him stashed, ready to go. Should I be expecting to throw him in my starting rotation in the next week?
Possibly Monday. I believe they have Irvin Santana who is listed as the starter for Monday. Wednesday night, Ned Yost was spotted in Omaha at the Omaha Storm Chasers game. When asked what he was doing in town, it was, "I'm checking out the progress of our young arms." Coar was on the mound that night, extended his scoreless innings to another 5 with 1 hit, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. He's got nothing left to do at AAA. And in spite of a loss today, the Royals are only 2 back of the wild card at this point. It's a little early to be looking at wild card races, but the point is they're still in it. And so he's not on the 40-man roster. That's the key, though. Otherwise, I would be very confident that we would see him this week. But when you say over the next couple of weeks, we talked about this last week. It's soon. It's imminent, and possibly Monday.
Yeah, Irvin Santana, I know you said he's slated, at least right now on paper, to be the starter on Monday. He did come out of the bullpen on Friday, so I'm not sure how much that plays into his repertoire and what he's used to doing, or if they just felt comfortable pulling him out of the bullpen because they knew in the back of their head he wasn't actually going to start on Monday. So I don't know if there's anything to read into that or not. All right, cool. I appreciate the vote of confidence, if you will, in that for me. Chris, any other prospects that you're looking at besides? I'll put the caveat, besides maybe the obvious ones that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, is that that's the Vidal Brujans, and people are still stashing Wander Franco and what have you. We talked about Joe Adele a little bit earlier on in the show. Anybody else that you think is worth keeping a hold on, maybe besides your Jarren Duran?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to co-sign on Coar. I think he's he might be the top ranked pitching prospect in the minors right now, left now that Manoah's got promoted in terms of the rest of the season for this year. So I've had in the leagues where I have him, I'm hoping he does come. I do think another guy that's a little off the radar for many people might be Joe Ryan in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is not afraid to promote pitchers that are doing well. They tend to bring them up, and I don't know whether he's going to be a starter or whether he's going to be an opener, but he should come up this year. He's in AAA. He's 25 years old. He pitched over 100 innings in 2019. He's got really, I think he's got it this year in AAA. He's got like a 32-6 strikeout to walk rate. I think you'll be seeing him pretty soon in one way or another. I don't know what his role will be in Tampa because of the way they use pitchers, but he's an intriguing arm for me, and he's someone that I drafted a decent amount of in like the draft champions format this year, and so I'm hoping to see him soon. And then the other player that we talked about, Adele, but in terms of a bat, I would like to. I'm hoping we'll see Brandon Marsh pretty soon too. I know he was sidelined with an injury, but I think he's on his way back. I haven't checked on him in a few days, and he's a good hitter. And it would really be Trout's out. He's out for a while, and I think it would be great to see that. I mean, the future of Anaheim includes both Marsh and Adele in the outfield, and Marsh is a superior defender as well. I think that I'm hoping both those guys get the call soon at the big league level. I have a lot of places where I've had Marsh, and then the last thing I just say is, I don't know if I was Cincinnati, I don't know if I'd call him up or not. But my favorite pitching prospect in baseball is Nick Lodolo. He's polished. He's a pitcher. He's not a thrower. I've always been like 30 spots higher on him than the rest. And I'm not a prospect expert. Let me just be really clear. I'm not a scout. Like James Anderson, Chris Welsh, Eric Cross, the Prospects Lives crew, those, Jeff Ponce, those guys are doing, Chris Crawford, Chris Blessing. I mean, these guys they know what they're doing. But I do think I'm pretty good at identifying prospects that are going to have a positive effect in fantasy. I think it's one of the things I think I'm the best at in terms of my own personal play when I measure myself up against others. There's plenty of things I'm much worse at. But Lodolo's just always struck me as a guy that he's not sexy. He doesn't have, he just pitches, and he's always just pitched well. And when you throw into Kyle Boddy in the Cincinnati pitching machine, I just think they're going to get the most out of him. And they may save him till 2022. They may save his bullets, but I'm hoping they don't. And he's someone that I'm keeping my eye on for the second half of 2021.
Yeah, I think the one thing about pitchers being called up early, I'm never too surprised to see a pitcher getting pushed up. Because here's the thing, is like a pitcher only has so many bullets, whether they throw them in the minors or throw them in the majors. You get the most out of those bullets at the major league level, especially when you have a team in Cincinnati that can work with those guys. Back to Marsh, he's been playing. He's got 16 games under his belt at AAA. He's not been knocking down the door, to say the least. He's slashing a 183, 338, 317, so lower slugging than OBP. You don't typically want to see that. The 183 average isn't helping either. 18.9% walk rate, though, at AAA. That's not a bad thing. So maybe if you can cut down on that a little bit to bring up that average, take a couple extra swings, we'll see. But yeah, I agree. I think that the plan all along was Marsh would probably make it up before Adele, unless Adele cut down that strikeout rate, which she, as Kevin pointed out, has not been doing. Of course, the power's there and will continue to be there, but not doing the one thing that he was expected to work on and work toward in AAA. All right. If you guys have another prospect, you can put them into this category. The last category we have is our wild card. Again, these are any players that we didn't have a chance to talk about that you think is worth speculating on. Kevin, any wild cards you want to throw out there for everybody to, keep to at least put on their watch list?
Yeah, another one of those guys that was getting a lot of talk during draft season, struggled, but is performing much better recently, and more importantly, getting a lot more playing time recently. Willie Castro is starting to hit for the Tigers. A little bit of power, stolen base opportunities. He's played, including today, now 7 days in a row. He was playing 2 to 3 games a week as he was struggling. So just on the basis of everyday at bats alone, in addition to the fact that he is hitting actually now, he's actually available in over a third of TGFBI leagues and only 12% rostered Yahoo. So he's fairly widely available, especially in the shallower leagues. And I would definitely grab him if your league is one that he is available.
All right, good call here. He did make my honorable mention in my Need for Speed article as well. So Detroit has that same Seattle matchup next week as well. So, Chris, anybody else you want to give some attention to that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
So, I think it's getting time to potentially stash Severino and Sale. making sure that they're owned in your leagues. If they're not, it's not for everybody. But if you're in 7th, 8th, 9th place and could use a huge boost in pitching points, and that would put you forward in the standings, I think that they're worth it. And then I just got to shout out, this is not a real stash or not someone that I think you're going to want on your fantasy team, but I play in a fantasy league. It's a 3-sport league with a guy named Hayden Shenefield. And if you don't know who Hayden Shenefield is, you should Google his last name, Shenefield. He was just signed by the Reds after joining Kyle Boddy AMA from a burrito shop. And he's a pitcher, and he asked, how do I get noticed? And Kyle told him, and he just got signed. And Jeff Posson wrote a great story on ESPN about it. So go look up Hayden Shenefield, Shenefield. And I think it's just baseball is this amazing, beautiful tapestry of like events. And I just discovered this week that Czech baseball, like from the Czech Republic, is a real thing. There's just so much, it just keeps on giving and giving. But go read Jeff Posson's article on ESPN about Hayden Shenefield. I am battling him in baseball right now. I beat his ass in football. He outdid me in basketball. But we play, and I don't know this guy. Like we met online on Twitter, on baseball Twitter, the way we've all met, and now he's signed a contract with the Reds.
Nice.
Just want to give a shout out to Hayden, and it's an amazing, wonderful world we live in when you see things like this happening. So there's a lot of crap out there we all deal with. Embrace the positivity as much as you can and focus on it. And getting signed while doing an AMA, while being on a Reddit in a burrito shop is to play Major League Baseball or to play professional baseball that's like a Disney movie waiting to happen.
You took my line. I'm pretty sure Disney already has the rights. The rookie style movie. Yeah. We'll see who plays them in the featurette. I like it. Good call out, Chris. All right, we'll leave it. Kevin, I'm going to leave it to you with any parting words you have for our listeners, and take it away.
Nothing really new, and not to beat a dead horse, but we've been bringing it up, like you said, 2 to 3 weeks now. 2 to 3 weeks now, we're really start concentrating on categories. And one thing that I think is important is not to get discouraged if you're not necessarily moving up in the rankings. If you're closing the gaps, then you're making progress. I'm performing not well in a few leagues, and it can get very discouraging when you see the same point total every time you pull up the league. But if you look closely, if you're closing those gaps and starting to gain in categories, then you still are progressing.
Okay, it is a grind. We all know this by now. If you don't, here's your friendly weekly reminder. It is a grind. Do not give up on it, because you know what? Somebody else in your league will. And there's always going to be a chance to jump up the standings in the next couple of weeks as people start to fall off or start paying attention to their other leagues. And football's right around the corner. We talked about a lot of players here, and if there was a player that we didn't talk about or you were thinking about bidding on and you want us to discuss them in the future, let us know. You can email us at onthewirepod@gmail.com. You can shoot us a DM over on the Twitter at onthewirepod, or of course you can join the PL Plus over at pitcherlist.com, where you get access to the Pitcherlist Discord and the advice and banter of over 900 members, including all the incredibly smart staff there that are just waiting to help you win all of your leagues. I'd like to once again thank Chris at Baseball Pods for joining us for this episode. Chris, could you remind everybody, all of our listeners, where they can either listen to you, if you have any pods coming up, or read your work, and anything you might be working on top of your Dynasty rankings that they should be on the lookout for?
The Dynasty rankings have consumed me. They're in my dreams.
They'll do that.
They're in my dreams. I'm trying to figure out what to do with Jared Walsh and others. I have nightmares about it, getting the ranking wrong. So I'll get that up in the next few weeks, and that'll be probably one of the biggest things I did. And then I think probably around the midseason, you'll start to see me post some. I did some preseason 5 guys series. 5 guys, just 5 guys that have things in common. And I'll probably be doing some midseason review on 5 guys I got right that are pitchers, 5 guys I got wrong. And not only guys, but like why? What did I miss? So for example, like I was really wrong on Max Scherzer this year, not because he was terrible, but because he's fantastic. And I misread the situation. So trying to do some self-reflection, and hopefully people can learn from some of the mistakes I made and also some of the calls that I got right in the first half. But baseball-pods.com, that's where the content is. And then I'm at baseballpods on Twitter, always available. My DM should be open. Happy to interact with anyone. And thanks so much to you guys for having me on. It's an honor to be on the esteemed Pitcher List podcast network. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks again, Chris, for joining us. It's been very insightful. I appreciate all the players you've thrown out there, and then just the shout outs that definitely didn't cross my mind. That's going to do it for us on this week's On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and leaving a rating review is always appreciated. Once again, you can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And Kevin is at HastingKevin. And keep an eye out for Kevin's weekly FAAB preview article every Sunday, as well as my FAAB review article titled Waiver Watcher that comes out about midweek each week. Both can be found over at pitcherlist.com, and you can follow at pitcherlist on the Twitter for more updates. As we mentioned at the top of the show, and as Chris mentioned, we are a proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network, along with 20 other incredible podcasts. Make sure to follow at Pitcher List Pods to get updates about every new episode that drops from each of them, and give them all a listen. We wish you the best of luck in all of your leagues and hope you win all of your bids by exactly $1. Thanks once again for Chris for joining us, and for Kevin Hastings, I am Adam Howe. With that, we bid you goodbye.